Hello, this is Kyle Matthews of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. We're pleased to have another interview for the Coronavirus Diaries, discussions about human rights during the global pandemic. We're very fortunate today to have David Cattin. David is the Secretary General of Parliamentarians for Global Action, and a very important NGO that does work to strengthen democracy and protect human rights. David, thank you for finding time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Kyle.
So David, like me, I know your work's been disrupted. We had plans to meet at the Canadian Parliament in late March, early April. That was cancelled.
Yes.
Maybe to start off with, you are in Rome right now, which is the epicenter in Europe for the coronavirus. Tell us a bit about what life is like there for the average citizen and for you.
Yes, well, Italy was the first country in Europe to make a lockdown with very strong restrictions to freedom of movement and other civil liberties. I think the overall conduct here is really in line with the government and the decisions, which is of course also justified by the public health emergency, and it's in compliance with international human rights law as far as I can say, especially Article 12 of the ICCPR and other provisions. All in all, now the situation is getting better because the number of people being infected is below 1. So now the rate of the contagion is 0 plus something. So that means that we had a big peak about 10 days ago, and now it's really a slow but progressive decline of the disease. And the main issue in the national debate is how to open again society, what sectors to open first, how to identify people who are immunized or and distinguish them from those who may be still subjected to the contagion, how to protect those more vulnerable, because we have seen that the highest rate of people dying of this disease, and without prejudice, unfortunately, to what's going on in other parts of the world, including North America. But really, Spain and Italy have been the ones with the highest dead number of people dead because families live together here. And you had this terrible phenomenon of young people, adult people, essentially passing the disease to the elderly. Mm-hmm. And the elderly being the one most vulnerable, with weak capacities to resist. And of course, also there are other countries where maybe like Germany, you have all young people living on their own. So it's more difficult for them to bring the disease to their grandfathers and grandmothers. So there are societal issues that led Italy. And then, of course, there were a lot of mistakes in the health care system in the north, in the Lombardy region, which is maybe an excellent place where to get cured for cancer and other very sophisticated disease. But instead, these pandemics, these epidemics have been neglected. So paradoxically, if you see, it's really incredible. The most effective medical facility in Italy, as of today, it's in Naples, because they had cholera until the 70s. So they had in place all the protocols to deal with an epidemics. So there is an hospital called Cotugno. There is also something available on Sky News in the UK and in the world. And this is the only big hospital in Western Europe where there is not a single case of a service provider, a doctor, a nurse, or any person working in the hospital not being infected by the disease. They have 0 numbers there after they tested all of them. So this shows how in Milan, the most sophisticated place in Italy, they failed. And maybe Naples, where instead they are not as economically vibrant as in Milan, they had, however, the right protocols in place. So it shows how, unfortunately, we had very big failures in the north of Italy, especially in Milan, in Lombardia, in that very rich region that led to the spread of the contagion, unfortunately.
So, David, the other aspect of your work is that your headquarters is in New York City, which has become also the epicenter of the coronavirus in North America.
Yes.
How is your team functioning now in New York? Are they all working from home? What is this,
Yes.
what is this meant for the work of PGA?
Yes, I was on mission in Stockholm when the WHO called this a global pandemic. I was in the office until the last day of February, and during that last week, I also started to perceive some uncomfortable feelings that this was not properly looked at by the authorities. I myself was wearing gloves. I was wearing gloves in the subway, and nobody, life was as usual, and I couldn't believe it, because in Italy the disease was already coming very aggressively. So we were prompt. I alerted some of the staff already at the end of February that we might have needed to take some actions. But of course, I would have not wanted to see what is happening in New York now. So it was far from our desires. But let's say that as soon as when this emerged, as soon as the pandemic was recognized as such by the WHO, that was on the 11th of March, we decided to close both offices in New York and The Hague, even in the face of the Dutch government being one of the few in Europe not taking almost any aggressive action. The lockdown in the Netherlands really has been one of the last ones. Now only Sweden is the country without the lockdown. I think it's working well. All staff is in good health. We are also accustomed to work in a distant, because we also have different offices. We have staff located in Kinshasa, one of them working more from Brussels than from The Hague. I myself, being traveling a lot on mission, I need to work many times from home or from or other locations. So we are very used to this, and our network is worldwide. So they know us, how to find us. The parliamentarians in 139 countries, they know how to find us through the internet, WhatsApp, and any type of possible device. So it's more difficult, but to a certain extent, for us, it has not been a real challenge.
So, David, Parliamentarians for Global Action, you work on a whole slew of human rights issues, environmental issues, but you really, at the basis of your membership, are parliamentarians, people that are the backbone of democracies. What should we be looking out for right now? I know we've seen some parliamentary democracies that have passed emergency laws.
Yes.
Shutting down, like in Hungary, is a dangerous case, that a move towards authoritarianism. What should parliamentarians be doing right now and keeping an eye on to protect human rights in their own jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, President Duterte of Philippines said that the police should shoot on those who violate the lockdown or the quarantine or whatever it is. It's really terrible to see the head of an executive power to order the killing of its citizens in that way. So I think it is extremely it's extremely counterproductive not to continue the work that we normally do. So it's essentially business as usual, plus in the field of democracy, the defense of democratic principles, and the promotion of human rights. You know it better than us, as one of the best think tanks in North America with Concordia University. You know what we are doing. Atrocity prevention starts from protecting democratic principles, because it's when there are major abuses against minorities, against vulnerable groups, when there are grievances, when people are excluded from elections, when people are suppressed, imprisoned, that you plant the seeds for revolt, rebellion, revolution, violence, retaliation, you name it, the cycle of violence, and the one that may be invoked by those, especially those in power, to justify mass atrocities. So it's like a cycle that needs to be closed from the beginning, and to the end. And the end, we know that very well in PJ, because our biggest project in the last 20 years has been the support for the International Criminal Court, which has the aim to end impunity for these mass atrocities. So that we work before the beginning and we work after the end, and hoping to stop and to address them. So I think we are seeing very dangerous trends in different sides of the world. If you will go on our website, we just published today the testimonial of one of the opposition leaders from the Ecuadorian parliament, who chairs our national group. She's even part of nominally she's part of the government, but she's a dissenting one. And she took refuge in Mexico. Now, because she had fear for her own safety and security in Ecuador. Now she's in Mexico, and she has the right, in our view, to participate in the virtual e-parliament sessions. Nowadays, because of this fact that we have to be distant, even if you are persecuted, you can still better protect your constitutional rights in this type of paradoxical situation where you don't need to be physically there. You can be elsewhere and still exercise your prerogative as a parliamentarian, correct? Well, they have done every possible thing to impede their access to the e-parliament, to the virtual sessions of the Ecuadorian parliament. So you will see a dossier in our website on herself denouncing this situation. There is also another member of our Ecuadorian parliament who's calling for help vis-a-vis issues like debt relief and other problems that are affecting Ecuador, where they have no money to rescue the victims, to burn, to dispose of the bodies of the people who die of COVID-19, who are just left in the street of Guayaquil. I'm sure you have seen the terrific.
Yeah, I've been seeing that city is really being hit hard, and they're struggling to deal with this public health challenge.
For us, you see, for us in Italy or in New York, it is a public health crisis. It is a socio-economic crisis. Also, people are losing jobs. It's a very difficult situation. For people in Ecuador, it's also an humanitarian crisis. And that's where we should all work together towards the responsibility to protect our fellow brothers and sisters who are victims of this humanitarian crisis. And if the government of Ecuador is unwilling or unable to genuinely perform its role, there is a role to play by the international community. So we are trying to send that message very strong, clear, and loud through our channels. Ecuador also asked for a webinar that we are trying to facilitate with some of our most important Latin American members. And we're also inquiring whether the OAS wants to co-sponsor this. We have a cooperation agreement, an MOU with the OAS. And I would like to invite maybe any Spanish-speaking member of the Montreal Institute to join this, because I think it's an experiment we are making. It's a new step we are making. But we need to try to help, at least in Ecuador, we think we can try to help. There are other situations, for example, in Africa, we are hearing from a lot of our members, they have a lot of difficulty to connect with the central government, to connect with the electorate. Being in a lockdown means that also you as a parliamentarian, you are at risk. You cannot really communicate and be with the others. The internet and other means of communications are not so well functioning in many places like Central African Republic. So we are trying to gather the input. And of course, we have immediately, as soon as Secretary General Guterres made the appeal to halt, to stop armed conflict, to have a global ceasefire agreement among all warring parties in the world, we immediately endorsed it. Because it's clearly necessary now to unite forces against the spread of the virus. It can hit anyone, from Prince Charles to the last rural member of a community in Cameroon. Anyone can be the victim of this virus. So it's our common interest. So it's where our global international community interest means our own selfish national, personal, parochial interests. It's one and the same, correct? So I think that's really a very good strategic call that the Secretary General made. So we're trying to do a mixed bag of, trying to help our members, on the other side, trying to look into the policies that would make a difference. We also have very important program supported by Global Affairs Canada. And that was one of the goals of the meeting we should have had in Ottawa at the House of Commons on the 30th of March, to provide a little bit of visibility to 5 years of incredible work where PGA, thanks to the support from Canada, has been, because they gave us the money to do it. We started it thanks to that support in 2015. We became the single most proactive player on the Biological Weapons Convention, the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. And in that process, of course, you look at how to prevent, to enact legislation, to get states to ratify, as we did last year with Central African Republic and Tanzania and Niue and Nepal and other countries that were not parties to it. We are looking at the weapon dimension of the biological threat. But now we are looking at also how to use biolaboratories to support the work of the health sector. It's all about testing. It's all about preventing. So these capabilities, are they there on the ground? They're not there in most countries. If we had done a lot more work to prepare for biological threats, we would have been more equipped to confront this virus or pathogens in the future, or even terrorist attacks using biological weapons in the after tomorrow days, when we go back to. So this is an area where also we are looking at where there are loopholes in legislation, where there are loopholes in policy, and how science can drive the response to what we see as disinformation and misinformation that are negatively influencing the policy making by decision makers, including the parliamentarians, who must maintain their prerogative to scrutinize the government.
So, David, I see there's an opportunity here for PGA think tanks like MIGS to maybe be a bit more proactive, try to build some of the digital infrastructure to connect MPs, senators, you name it, who right now might not be speaking or thinking about this. They're on lockdown, but maybe there's an opportunity for us to start spearheading some of these discussions.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you one last question, David, because I know it's Good Friday and it's around dinner time in Rome.
And there is the Pope. The Pope is going to do all alone the Via Crucis. Nobody's going to be there. And he has been able to, share a lot of feelings that we all share. And more than ever, he is really a point
I know there's an amazing concert planned for Sunday in Milan with Italy's
Andrea Bocelli. Yes, of course.
Yeah. So that's on my to-do list on Sunday. But I want to ask you a question. You talked about misinformation, and we're seeing a lot of this fake information on what is causing, conspiracy theories of 5G is causing this. But a lot of the misinformation or disinformation campaigns are coming not from democracies, but from authoritarian regimes that seem to be weaponizing information to confuse us, to impact our public health and our ability. How concerned should we be about these disinformation campaigns coming from authoritarian states?
Yeah, no, of course, I think you are the expert here much more than me, but I think what's going on now is, the easiest way to channel the unhappiness, the anxiety of large segments of the population, especially the less educated one, but also those who are educated but they don't want to see the truth, is to find some enemy somewhere, some scapegoats against whom to, and this is happening. This tends to happen. It tends to happen in a critical context when it's in a democratic society. So I would say we should have the anticorps to block this. It's happening. It's happening in Italy. It's happening in North America. It's happening elsewhere in Europe, in Japan, in Korea. But when it happens in China, it's not any Chinese that do this. It's the government itself. that do this or tries to do it. When it happens in Russia, it's maybe trying to point the finger in some direction that for a long time had to be dealt with by those in power. So one has to be extremely careful about, we all welcome humanitarian support and aid. We have seen it coming to Italy, for example. At the same time, we need to keep our eyes open and remember how many people died in Syria. Many more people died in Syria than the victims of coronavirus. And this is not a virus. This was a deliberate choice of individuals who committed mass atrocities against other individuals. And some major powers like Russia have been behind those mass atrocities, undeniably, with ground troops, with aircrafts. So it is an extremely problematic reality in which we live, where, of course, some governments, like the Russian Federation, is trying to launch a major PR campaign to remove from the public domain certain truths that we have seen, we have witnessed over the past 10 years. The worst armed conflict, the one with more civilian casualties after the Rwandan genocide. So I think we need to be extremely careful of the manipulation. We need to be extremely careful of the propaganda. It's a good old, even more than the fake news here, I see the traditional propaganda machinery being put forward. And I think we need to rely on science, even though scientists are divided. Virologists, epidemiologists, experts advising the World Health Organization. So we need also to be, to educate the people, to educate our policymakers about, the fact that, there are not absolute truths here. There is a trial and error process in science, and things are developing. But, we have seen unacceptable conspiracy theories gaining ground, like this virus being brought by Bill Gates or stuff like that, that reached us on our social media and so on. This is really unacceptable, and there has to be a way for this amounts to defamation. This amounts to violation of the criminal law of many countries. There has to be a way that we should not be exclusively dependent on Facebook or on Google or on other what I call them industrial conglomerate. They are industrial conglomerates. They are not just guys on the web. They have so much money and power. So something needs to be done. WhatsApp, the Facebook company, through the WhatsApp, included an automated fact checking. Given that almost 50 plus million Italians or people living in Italy, including foreigners living in Italy, they always use WhatsApp. It's the most used tool of communication nowadays, WhatsApp. And given the prevalence of these incredibly and totally unacceptable fake news, they included an automated fact checker at the origins of many chains, thereby blocking them. So that's good, but we need to find a way that this is happening systematically all the times, because I am the person most in favor of freedom of speech, but we also need to protect the reputation of people. We need to safeguard the science with its all differences and different opinions, but we need to find ways and means to filter what goes out there, not in the way the Chinese do or others do. So that's where the challenge is, that these types of filters or mechanisms do not become another tool of social control. We're not talking about social control over ideas, political ideas, ideologies, beliefs, and so on. We are talking about when individuals are using the media that we have today to destroy the reputation and the credibility of others, and to instill in the public terror, fear, misunderstanding, misconceptions of the reality that can lead to dramatic consequences. So Yeah.
I agree with you, David. I think more focus needs to be looked at I mean, you say these big social media conglomerates, they are, they're bypassing traditional media. There's not as much fact checking. Anybody can manipulate these systems. So we have to have, democracies have to have, I think, mature discussions, mature policy discussions on what can we do to preserve freedom of speech, but not allow these platforms to be exploited by authoritarian governments or individuals with ill intent in our own societies.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, David, I'm going to just close this by saying that we've been doing training for Global Affairs Canada on misinformation campaigns. Maybe it'd be interesting to see of doing a digital online event of training parliamentarians on this, based on our work and some of our fellows. Something we can discuss offline. But I want to really thank you for joining us today. Your comments and the work of the PGA are very important.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
All the best.
Bye bye.